The regular season has come to a close for the redraft and the QB54 Arm and Leg leagues. King of the Castle is in its second week of beta testing, and the playoff hunt is heating up for the dynasty leagues. All this and more in 20 seconds. Hey, fellow fanatics, welcome to the Fanatically Real broadcast, sponsored by Football Darts and Fantasy Sports Alliance. Happy Thanksgiving Eve to you all. I hope you are doing well. You know what? I don't like doing this by myself anymore. I'm bringing you in earlier and earlier every single week. How are you, my friend?
I am doing as well as I can ahead of this holiday weekend. A little bit of rough go last week, but definitely looking to relax a bit as far as my lineup watch goes and just get back to enjoying some football.
Well, I know that you have somewhere to be tonight. We do appreciate you still being on with us. So we're going to try to make it fairly quick tonight, but we do have a lot to cover as we have finished the regular season for the two leagues we mentioned at the beginning of the show. We got a lot of playoff implications we want to talk about tonight. And I don't know, just a whole bunch of other things we just want to make sure that we highlight tonight. But first, before we get into the meat and the potatoes of the show, let's talk about Football Darts. We'd like to thank our broadcast sponsor, Football Darts. Football Darts is a dart game that combines the skill of traditional darts with the strategies of American football. This innovative dart game is played on a uniquely designed multiple target dartboard. It can be played in sports bars, at tailgate events, as league tournaments, or as a leisure activity in the comfort of your home. If you would like to check out their officially licensed collegiate dartboards, go to footballdarts.com. You can now find them on Target, Wayfair, and now on Fanatics. Perfect for any man cave, just around the corner for Christmas. Kev, who's your college team anyway? I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
I really don't follow college all too closely. But if I was to pick one to follow, it would probably be Michigan.
Really? Mm-hmm. Thank you. That humbles me. They suck this year, man. They almost get beat by Rutgers. I almost thought about switching teams. I even said in a chat group that if Rutgers ends up winning this game, I'm going to switch over and be a Rutgers fan. I got the gear because of NCFF. But I could definitely see myself doing that. I see Jenna was on earlier. Jenna, how are you? MJ's on with us. And Randy is on with us. Randy, how are you? Matt FRB on with us with his Go Bucks. Makes me want to vomit, but thanks for reporting in anyways. Appreciate it, Matt. Hey, so let's talk about these guys right here, right? Empty Wagon. So I'm not going to give you my spiel this week. I'm going to give you something different. So here's 3 full-time Air Force guys that are doing this for the love of the sport. They found themselves talking about fantasy football all the time and said, you know what? We need to do this, but do it somewhere else rather than just sitting here in our motor pool in our offices talking about this. So they decided to start the Empty Wagon Fantasy Football podcast. If you have not listened to these guys ever, first off, shame on you. If you're not listening to them on a regular basis, you're doing fantasy football wrong. You got to go out and listen to Brad, Josh, and Eric talk about football. Doesn't matter what it is, fantasy, NFL related. The guys put out great information. They believe in what they're putting out. I believe in what they're putting out. I have used their information for drafting purposes, starting lineup purposes. Heck, when I did a startup in NCFF a couple years ago, I picked MVS up for $30-some on a $100 budget to get this guy because they were touting him up so well or so much during that offseason. You got to go out and give them a listen. They're under the umbrella of FSA. You can find them on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, with us. They're also on, what's the other one that I'm missing? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Am I missing anything? No, that's pretty much it, right?
Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, YouTube. Twitter.
We're on YouTube too. They're on YouTube. You're on YouTube. Everybody's out there on the tube. So you can go find them on all their social media at Empty Wagon FF. They also have Twitter accounts for all of them. make sure you go out and listen to Empty Wagon. And there's another group of guys that you got to listen to, a pair of guys. We'll go with pair. That'd be Kevin and Average Josh, not to be confused with Empty Wagon Josh. Kev, you guys are on Tuesday night. Why don't you give your own pitch about the Average Bros Fantasy Show?
And we give you our average advice, maybe not living up to the Empty Wagon guys, but every week we come on at Tuesdays at 8, and we give you our look on the previous week's winners and losers and highlight some games, both from a NFL perspective and a fantasy perspective. And then we move into giving you a couple of tidbits on lineup advice, whether it be guys that we feel you should sit or start based on matchup, and then guys we're looking to add in those spots. And then my personal favorite part of the show, which me and Josh love to do, a little competition between the two of us, is our top dog segment, where we try to predict who we believe is going to be the best fantasy player within their respective positions in the upcoming week, and have a little bit of a rivalry going back and forth as that's concerned. But a lot of fun, a lot of great information, and we like to keep it a very interactive. Throw your comments up on the screen, as we'll do throughout tonight's show, and interact with you guys.
Speaking of interaction, Chris Simpson says, when can we pay or choose our team for Echo? I want to draft again. Oh, Lord. We have to get out of this season first, Chris, before we can start thinking about our next Dynasty League, but I do appreciate the enthusiasm. Hey, so all of us, the Fanatically Real broadcast that you're watching now, the Average Bros that happens on Tuesday nights that Kevin just got done talking about, and the Empty Wagon shows that are happening on Saturday and Monday mornings can all be found on 3 different platforms. That would be Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure you go out and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow. All of us also have podcasts now as well. You can find us at 5 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, Monday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. Kevin, where can they find us for all of our podcasts?
You can find us at Anchor, at anchor.fm, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon, Stitcher, and a handful of others. Wherever you get your podcasts for your listening pleasures, we are there.
So we just mentioned Rutgers and me possibly going over and starting to follow them over Michigan. Ross Norris, the creator of NCFF and the co-founder of the QB54 Arm and Leg League and the new league that we are beta testing for next year, King of the Castle, says Rutgers is going bowling. He means because my team over in his league, the NCFF, is currently sitting at 6-5. Even if I lose this week and go 6-6, I qualify for a bowl game over in NCFF. Very excited about that. I was one starting lineup move away every single week from being undefeated right now. That's how close this league is. One stinking starting lineup every single week. Chris asked me this the other day in a group chat, said, can we also discuss all year round trading for Dynasty? Yes, we can discuss that. We will definitely make sure that that is one of our top topics in the off season. And Randy says he hopes he goes bowling. Randy, did we end up having a game this year? Did we end up playing our rivalry bowl game or our rivalry game at the beginning of the year? And if we did, what was the outcome of that? Because I know there was a big losing streak that I went through in NCFF, and I don't know during my losing streak if I played you or not, so let me know. Hey, so this is the part of the show we normally talk about NFL news. I only had one piece of NFL news, and I was going to hold on to it until we got to scheduling stuff for primetime games. And I know, Kevin, you and Josh talked about NFL news last night on the show. Was there anything big that you wanted to bring up on the show tonight that everybody should know?
The one piece of news I don't believe that we had touched on yesterday, if you didn't listen to us then, you're going to catch now, is that Teddy Bridgewater is slated to be back this week.
Good deal.
And not PJ Walker. And as we did discuss last night, Drew Brees was put on the IR, so he will miss 3 games this week and then next week, as this previous week had already counted as one. So they are going to be looking to start Taysom Hill again. And on the topic of dynasty, everybody should be throwing their hat in that ring, as it looks like the writing's on the wall there, as Taysom's going to be the guy heading into next year.
So Breeze still has one more year left on the contract, though, correct? So 2021 last year on the contract?
I don't know, and if it is, it was probably front-ended just to weigh out team-friendly options if there is another year. I thought it was a one-year deal with something like that, as most of your veteran quarterbacks that are making team-friendly deals do. They move the money one way or the other, knowing that the writing's on the wall with what they want to do, similar to what Brady had done in his final year with New England, where 2 years were basically vacant money, where nothing was owed and his contract was cut short. So I would expect to see something like that for Breeze this year.
I wonder if we got a stat guy out there that could clarify that for us, because usually I am the stat guy. So see if anybody's out there tonight that can let us know what Breeze's most recent contract looked like, and if anybody else out there is looking for it, let us know as we get into these games of the week around the Alliance. We're going to go through these, and then we are going to talk about the playoff picture as we are getting ready to start that this week. So let's start with the New England region. It's a very crazy storyline here in the New England region. The Superfan won her last game of the regular season with a defeat of the Average Joes. The crazy part is the Average Joes are now ranked 18th in the power rankings, but are 10th out of 12 teams in their region. Final score there, 188 to 163. And we have a very similar story in the Appalachian region, as the Mad Scientists were defeated by the Angry Vipers. Final score there was 162 to 159. Just a 3.3 point difference. And even with the loss, the Mad Scientists find themselves in the 20th spot of the power rankings, but 9th out of 12 teams in their region. In the Great Lakes region, the regular season finished with a three-way tie at the top of the region, and that's because there was a win by the Killers and by Turd Ferguson. Turd Ferguson ends up beating the Ohio River Monsters. Turd Ferguson was the top scoring team in all of the Alliance this week with a final score of 204 to 130. And we're going to talk about that playoff picture and that three-way tie later on in the show when we get down there a little bit further. In the South Atlantic, there was a five-way tie for the fourth spot in the South Atlantic region, and that occurred because there were surprise wins by Beast Mode and Unicorn Legends. However, the closest game of the week happened between the Georgia She-Devils and Lost. Georgia She-Devils getting her third victory of the season with the final score of 134 to 131. And in the Gulf Coast region, this was our game of the week preview last week, which was pitting husband and wife, Rusty and Lucy James, against each other. Rum Runners was able to take out the Hookers with a final score of 132 to 117. The Rum Runners finish number one in the region, and the Hookers finish number two in the region. We don't have a graphic for the next piece of information, but very story-worthy. The Warriors, team here in the Gulf Coast region, were 0-10 coming into this week and finally won their only game of the year last week of the season, going 1-10, making every team in the Alliance at least have one win now. In the Western region, regular season ended with a three-way tie for first position as two of our empty wagon guys faced off against each other. Brad Buckner and the Factory of Sadness did not make it easy on the Gadget guys and Eric O'Neill to stay at the top of the region. Factory of Sadness got the win with a final score of 167 to 159, and we'll talk about this as we go into the playoff picture here in a little bit. Kev, I know we're going to talk about how things turned out in the Appalachian region, but why don't you give us a little bit of a preview before we get there?
Yeah, going into this week for the Appalachian region, every team not looking too deep into the tiebreakers was mathematically eligible for at least the fourth spot. But because of the tiebreakers and a loss by both myself and Damien, the mad scientist, kept us out and made the math pretty easy. Locking the Black Lions and the Sin City Kitties in the 3 and 4 spot. Once they won their games respectively, and as you had mentioned earlier in your NCFF league, where you're one move away in any game to win, I myself found to be put in the same situation where I was either one quarterback change or one receiver change away from winning my game, which I had only lost by 6 points, which doesn't bode well for my comeback to pass Damien in the power rankings and show him who the true champion is. But there's always next year.
What was your final record?
5-6, same as
still a
Damien.
possibility that you could make a bowl game even in FSA, which we'll talk about in a little bit what that looks like when we get to this playoff picture. But before we get to the playoff picture, let's get back to these games of the week and let's look at the dynasty leagues now. So the margin of victory game of the week in the Alpha Dynasty League took place between the Birmingham Iron and the Memphis Maniacs. Iron got the 0.94 point win with a final score of 165.5 to 164.56. The Iron moved to 8-3 on the year, and the Maniacs fall to 5-6. In the Bravo League, the Birmingham Barracudas continue to keep pace with the Omaha Mustangs and stay on top of the Western Division. The Barracudas defeated the Cincinnati Reds with a final score of 174 to 168. The Barracudas now match the Omaha Mustangs record of 8-3, and the two teams face off next week. In their Week 5 matchup, the Barracudas did take that win. In our margin of victory game of the week in the Charlie Dynasty League, the two teams were separated by just 1.04 points as the San Antonio Commanders topped the Florida Tuskers with a final score of 120.24 to 119.20. The Commanders moved to 8-3, while the Tuskers fell to 7-4. And in a monstrous game by the Steel Valley Smash, which they were also the highest scoring team in all of the dynasty leagues this week with 222 points, they defeated the St. Louis Stallions, who scored 127.88 points. The Smash now lead the Delta Dynasty League with a 9-2 record. The loss by the Stallions had them fall to 1-10. How are you doing over in Dynasty right now?
I would have to double check in Charlie. I don't remember how the Generals are doing. I know we did get a win this week, and I think it was my only FSA win. I did lose this week in Delta in an unfortunate loss to the Apollo, who we were tied for the division. So that would have given me first place overall. But because of a poor timing of Josh Allen's bye, forced me to very, very much underperform. So a rough go there. But I believe I play the Hitman again coming up soon. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Are you talking about is the Battle of New York, New Jersey, the Hitman that beat you last time?
Yes.
It just so happens I have the hat right close next to me. Man, that wasn't even planned at all, but I'll keep it on right now. I like this. This is good. Sean Purcell says he finally got connected. I know Sean and his roommate are traveling on the road right now. Hopefully the roommate is driving and Sean is not as he's watching the show. Sean, how are you right now? All right, let's get to this QB54 Arm and Leg League. We had two teams that scored 30 points in both the AFC and NFC regions, leagues, conferences. In the AFC, it was Rusty James beating Brian Lewis with a final score of 30-24. Lewis would have beat any other team this week in the AFC with that 24 points had he played anybody else but Rusty. And then the NFC, the 30 points were scored by Heather Newman, who defeated Bob Reddick. Final score there was 30-21. Sean says that he is not driving, so all is good. That is good to hear and know. Want you all to stay safe, especially on this holiday weekend. So let's see if we can't pull up these power rankings for the FSA League and show you all where we're at right now. So here is the top 14, as you can see, as the screen is cut off right there. The Maniacs remained at number 1. The Rum Runners, who ended up beating his wife to take over the number 1 spot in the Gulf Coast region, jumped up 3 spots to the number 2. Ship Huggers and Gadget Guys both dropped by 1. Killers moved up 3. Turd Ferguson moving up 9 with his win. Hookers, with that loss to the Rum Runners, dropped 3. West Coast Adventures move up by 1. Inferno move up by 4. Ohio River Monsters dropped by 3. Callous Cowboys, after their loss, dropped by 1. Naughty Dogs, after losing to the Unicorn Legends, dropped by 6. Trying to see if there's any other big movers. What's crazy right here is we just talked about how the Naughty Dogs dropped by 6 after his loss to the Unicorn Legends. The Unicorn Legends, even though she's not going to make the playoffs, jumped up 12 spots all the way to number 16, and she's not going to make the playoffs. Team a couple spots below her, the Monarchs, jumped up 8 spots and is going to make the playoffs. Crazy playoffs that we're going to have this year. Factory of Sadness, after beating the Gadget Guys, ends up jumping up 14 spots into number 21. Also not going to be able to make the playoffs. And then, Kevin, I know you don't want to hear this, but the Mad Scientist did drop 2 spots into the 20th spot, not going to make the playoffs, and you yourself finish the power rankings right now at 28. So neither one of you are going to make the playoffs. Damien ends up being 8 spots above you in the power rankings. He has 1 more quality win over you and a slight all-play record over you by less than 1/10 of a point. How does it make you feel right now?
Does not make me feel too good. My arch rival over there, edges me out as of now. I believe I have dynasty over him, so small victories where we can get them.
I love it. All right, so let's see if we can't get into this playoff picture for all of you. Let me take the screen down a little bit so it's easier for everybody to read. All right, so let's talk about the playoff picture. All right, so if you have been over to the FSA page recently, within the last day or so, you will see all of the regional playoff brackets are now at the top of the page, right? But before we look into those and dig into those, let's go ahead and go down here to the standings page and let's really talk about these. So at the end of the regular season, which was this week, week 11, the New England Phoenix had no real complications in their standings. What you see is what you get, and basically in this case, from the top to the bottom, the top 4 teams that are going to make this regional championship bracket, which 4 teams do go with number 1 playing number 4, number 2 playing number 3. We have the Maniacs versus the Assassin and the Chris Betts versus Superfan. No real complications in the Appalachian Black Bears region either, as the Ship Huggers will play the Black Lions and the Nihilists will play Sin City Kitties. Of course, this being Kevin's region here. We're going to slide down to the Great Lakes because this is where things get a little bit cloudy. So you see the 3 teams up there at the top, Turd Ferguson, Killers, and the Ohio River Monsters, all with 8-3 records. So what we do here at FSA, we actually use NFL's rules for breaking of ties. When there is more than 2 teams, or 3 and more teams in this case, that have ties that need to be broken, you go head-to-head matchup first. In this case, it was too easy to solve this. When you look at Turd Ferguson having to play these other 2 teams, the Killers and the Ohio River Monsters, Turd Ferguson ends up being 2-0. The Killers end up being 1-1. The Ohio River Monsters being 0-2 in that head-to-head matchup between the 3 teams. So as you see them in this order, Turd Ferguson, Killers, and the Ohio River Monsters, 1, 2, and 3. And let me pull that back up so you really can see it. So what's going to happen is Turd Ferguson and Garbage Points will play against each other in round 1, and Killers and the Ohio River Monsters will play in the other game in round 1. The South Atlantic Dragons region. So the top three teams weren't really that hard to figure out. Naughty Dogs at 8-3 end up coming out on top in the number 1 spot. Monarchs and Land Sharks both at 7-4. These two teams matched up the very last week of the season with the Monarchs getting the win, which puts them in the number 2 spot. But it was the number 4 spot, as you can see it here. If you can count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, 5-way tie for 4th place. So going back to the same thing that we had to do in the other region, you have to do head-to-head records with each one of them first. So when you're trying to break a 5-way tie, all of the teams face off against each other. So you'll have some variation of a record with 4 games in it. In this case, the Southern Sirens and the Lumiere are both 3-1. The Greenbacks are 2-2. The Kalunga Clan and the Unicorn Legends both 1-3. What happens then, if you look at the NFL tiebreaker rule, is after you've separated those, if there is still a tie, if possible, then you go to head-to-head record. In this case, it was possible to look at head-to-head record as the Southern Sirens had beat Lumiere earlier in the season, and Kalunga Clan had beat Unicorn Legends earlier in the season. So what you see here is the Southern Sirens in the number 4 spot, Lumiere 5, Greenback 6, Kalunga Clan 7, Unicorn Legends 8. And like I said earlier when we were looking at the power rankings, Unicorn Legends all the way down here at 8 at number 16 in the power rankings. So just crazy to see something like that. In the Gulf Coast region, we already talked about the Rum Runners knocking off the Hookers, which gives him a 10-1 record and her a 9-2 record. Inferno easily slide into the number 3 spot at 8-3. But it was this 4-way tie down here between Nature Coast, the Vols, Labradors, and 99 Problems. Again, we have to go head-to-head record with these teams. When you look at the head-to-head records, Nature Coast and Vols both had a 2-1 record. Labradors and 99 Problems both had a 1-2 record. When you look at the head-to-head between these teams, Nature Coast beat the Vols, Labradors beat 99 Problems, and that's why you see them right here in this order, which means Nature Coast Colonials, which is also the sponsor of our World Bowl, will be moving on into that number 4 spot. And we have one more region to go. So the Gadget Guys, West Coast Avengers, and the Calloused Cowboys. All of them end up playing against each other. They're all tied at 8-3. They all end up playing against each other. The records that you see here are 2-0, 1-1, and 0-2, which is why they're in the order that they are. But it was also a 3-way tie down here for the number 4 spot, where the Lunatics end up being 2-0. The Koalas 1-1, Factory of Sadness at 0-2, which means the Lunatics end up taking the number 4 spot. So Gadget Guys will play Lunatics in round 1. West Coast Avengers and Calloused Cowboys will play in the other pairing in round 1. I need to take a break, a breath, and a drink. Kevin, please give me something.
Yeah, it's crazy to watch how these all broke down. I know that we previewed it last week in a couple of the different ways that it could play out. And as we saw in the top 2 divisions, played out fairly simple, and then all madness breaks loose once you start to go down to the south and out west, and all of the different tiebreakers that had to be put in place. But that's the thing that I love about playing in a league set up this way, is that it's a shorter season. You play everybody once, so it kind of tightens things up and puts more emphasis on every single game that you play, and then it leads into a very competitive playoff push. Once you start to look into this, and there's no overlooked games, there's no overlooked teams. Everybody, as you can see in the Unicorn Legends, can either be a threat or be a spoiler, no matter what. And I believe we knew that coming into this week, that they could only play spoiler, but being the what was it, 18th best spoiler, I think is a pretty nice feather to put in their cap. And I know that one's pretty close to home for yourself.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because the way that last week played out with the teams that ended up losing, by Beast Mode beating Southern Sirens and Unicorn Legends beating Naughty Dogs and myself beating Land Sharks, which were all top teams, just how me myself got catapulted, I think, all the way from 5th to 2nd. And then me having to play the Land Sharks 2 weeks in a row, which is a very similar scenario that happened in the South Atlantic region last year as well, where MJ ended up having to play the Kalunga Clan in the last week of the regular season. We only had one round of regional playoffs last year, and she turned around and had to play Kalunga Clan in the very next game, first round of the only round in the regional championship, ends up defeating him and moving on to the world championship. So for me to have to play the Land Sharks 2 weeks in a row, very similar. I'm starting to see a pattern here happen in the South Atlantic region. As Matt FRB says here, the Great Lakes with 4 teams in the top 15, tough division. Great Lakes, always a tough division. It's our oldest division in all of FSA as well. So it will always be tough up there. So that is where our world championship went through last year, as the Creek Dogs was our world champion. So I expect to be good things out of the Great Lakes again this year. So one thing I wanted to show everybody. So in case you didn't know, we kind of skimmed past it, but this is what the playoff brackets look like for the regional championships. This is at the top of the page for the FSA, as you can see what we're looking at there as we're getting into the standings page there. So make sure you're going here to look at this. All of the games are also scheduled across the top here, so you can see those as the live scoring is happening. You can also see what the preview looks like for each one of these games up here, as far as what MFL says a possible final score would be. That is there for you to look at. MFL's game of the week this week for our first round of the playoffs say it's going to be in the Gulf Coast region, as the number 9 Inferno will take on the number 7 Hookers. These two teams played against each other in week 2. Hookers got the win during that week, 180 to 159. And now that I bring that up, I'm very curious to see what they say the outcome is this time. It shows not the same thing. Oh, it is. Okay, my bad. I'm losing my mind here. The Inferno ended up getting beat 180 to 159 in week 2. Now it says the Inferno are going to win 151 to 136 over the Hooker. So that is our game of the week. So let me talk about the rest of the playoff schedule and as it looks and why it is this way. All right. And I have a couple feelers out there for some of our new players that are rookies in 2020 that are giving us advice for things to do in 2021. And Kevin, I know you and I talked about this on my drive home tonight as well. So the Fanatically Real Bowl regional playoffs are going to be for the next 2 weeks. They are going to be weeks 12 and 13. The regional champion will come out and they will play in the world championship brackets, which will happen between weeks 14 and 16. The Alliance Invitational Bowl games, teams that qualify for that are anybody who are not involved in the regional championship, not involved in the world championship, but finished 6-5 or better. All of those games are going to be played in week 14. Here's why we decided to do that. Yes, I know this is kind of backwards thinking what I'm about to say. We wanted to make sure that these Alliance Invitational Bowl games got to avoid week 13. Why? We don't have any buys this week. As you see the schedule scrolling across the bottom there right now, no buys in week 12. However, there are 2 teams that are on buys in week 13. Kev, who are they?
It is Tampa Bay and Seattle,
Carolina.
maybe?
Nope, Carolina.
Yeah,
Carolina and Tampa Bay are off in week 13, right? We wanted to make sure the bowl teams, the Alliance Invitational Bowl games, or bowl teams got to avoid that week 13. But that is also the final round for us in our regional championship. But we wanted to make sure we thought these teams had been working around that, knowing that that was a thing all year. Wanted to make sure the Alliance Invitational Bowl games avoided that and played in week 14. Also, what we wanted was progressive games moving up to the rivalry bowl games, which are going to happen in week 15, which are the games that should happen just before the World Bowl, the World Championship Bowl game happens in week 16. So Alliance Invitational Bowl games in week 14, that means they get a bye or a lull in weeks 12 and 13. That gives me time to react and schedule those games. What I'm trying to do is make sure teams that are close in record, close in power rankings, not already part of the rivalry bowl regions that are playing against each other, and already not in their own region get matched up against each other. So it's this, I want to say complicated equation to make this happen, but it's really me sitting around with a couple of pieces of scrap paper, moving them around until I got a nice schedule build up, right? And that's how I did it last year at my mother-in-law's kitchen table. So this year I'll do something very, very similar. It gives me time to work on that. The rivalry bowl games. These are going to be the teams that end up losing in the regional championship final round. Okay. And I know Matt just asked, what is a rivalry bowl game? So rivalry bowl game are the teams that end up running up in the regional championships final round. So right now we're 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3 in each one of the regions. Once we get down to the final pairing, the team that ends up losing that final pairing will move on to the rivalry bowl game. All right, rivalry bowl game. When you think about it and you try to relate it to NCAA or college football, are the games that aren't the top 4 bowl games that are out there, the Rose Bowl, the other, all of that stuff, right? These the final 4 in the playoffs. These are the bowl games that are like your Rose Bowl, your Sugar Bowl, your Peach Bowl, those type of things, right? Where the same regions play against each other, the same conferences play against each other every year. Because we had to shake up the regions a little bit this year. We did not have a set schedule of who was going to play who. What I'm going to do is make sure those rivalry bowl opponents are very similar to what happened last year. In my mind, because when we created this, it was based on the Rose Bowl, which is the oldest bowl game in NCAA history, which puts our Great Lakes versus the Pac South, because that is, the Big Ten versus the Pac-12 in essence. So this year we don't have a Pac-12 or a Pac South. We still have a Great Lakes. So more than likely, Great Lakes and the Western region will play against each other in our rivalry bowl game. What's so special about the rivalry bowl games? The rivalry bowl games are the ones that come with prizes from our bowl game sponsors. We'll mention at the end of the show. So Matt Furby, that is what a rivalry bowl game is. Now, Kevin and I had a conversation tonight on the way home. Prior to us introducing the bowl games in 2019, we had something that was called the Alliance Invitational Tournament, which we might bring back in 2021, where it'll allow the remaining teams that are still out there, because we had 72 teams that are in the Alliance this year, with 24 that end up being on the bracket for the regional championship. The rest of the teams will have an opportunity to play in the Alliance Invitational Tournament. And we might run that next year again after taking a couple years off. Chris says the Euro ROW division next year. What is the ROW part of that, Chris? I would like to know. So rivalry bowl game is going to happen in week 15. The World Championship game, which is our Nature Coast tailgating World Championship game, is going to happen in week 16. And then our all-team bowl, Euro versus rest of the world division next year, Chris Simpson says. We'll see how that works out. We'll see how that plays out. I do, in fact, already have the map of what the rivalry bowl games will look like once we have all 16 regions have members in them. If you want to know what that looks like, go under the bowl games link on our website and you can see what that looks like.
So I think he was trying to say that next year having a specific division for teams that do not play in the U.S., not a bowl game. So this would be our koalas and anybody out of the U.K., if you will.
Okay, I got you. I like that. It's not bad. So the Euro guys are playing in the New England Phoenix region this year because we don't have a lot over there right now. Adding Greece, UK, and the Aussie all there. I like that. I can see you guys all being in one together. That's actually not a very bad idea whatsoever. I like that. So we might have to look into that. The world division or the world region is what we'll call that one. I like that. Anything outside. And then the all-team bowl game is happening in week 17. For those who don't know what that is our version of the Pro Bowl. It is another whole draft involved in that with a whole lot of fun that goes along with it. These are the two teams that runner up during the semifinals of the World Championship game. They sit for a week, watch the regional or the World Championship happen. They go back out and draft live here on the show, and then they play in the all-team bowl, which happens during week 17. If you would like to know more about those rules, make sure you go out on the main FSA MFL page, click on the rules, scroll towards the bottom, and you'll see the all-team bowl rules there. As we get closer to that week, we'll bring that up more and more. Let's see, what's Chris say? Chris says, I didn't want you to call it Griffins or something like that. Yeah, so originally or right now, if we do get a full Euro League where it is all of that European area, it will be the Griffins. That is already set in stone. Sean says we need to have an Asian conference. 100% agree. That is actually one of our 16 that we've got in theory, but it's the only one we don't have named yet either. I had an idea for names and logos, but every time I came up with something, it seems like the world of anime or Pokemon has already come up with the same ideas that I've come up with. So I still don't know what we're going to do with that Asian region yet. And while we're live here tonight, if anybody has any ideas, throw your ideas out there. Kev, is that something you're into? Are you into that kind of stuff?
I am not. The only thing out of Asia that I could really relate to is some sushi or dumplings. Other than that, can't come up with any names there for you.
All right, so before we move on to primetime games, how we've done the last couple of weeks and all of that stuff, let's talk about this league that we're beta testing here in 2020 to get ready for 2021. This is the King of the Castle League. For those that are not involved and haven't heard about this yet, what we're doing is a relegation league that plays every single week with 16 teams starting at the bottom here in the Esquire and Lady division. As you win, you move up. As you lose, you move back down, all the way back down to the Esquire and Lady level. What that means is you got to get 4 wins in a row to move all the way up to the King and Queen level. Once you reach that level, you will sit on the throne with a challenger coming up from the Grand Duke or Grand Duchess level to you and play. Once we have a king or a queen, it will be a weekly payout starting in 2021 after we continue beta testing this. Reason I bring it up is the waiver wire ran at 6 p.m. today with a new set of rules for this week as we continue to beta test. Pillaging. So when a team wins and they get ready to move up to the next level, they get to pillage a player from the starting lineup of the team they just beat. A week ago, we decided it was going to be 2 players. This week, we decided it was going to be 1 player. We also changed the waiver wire rules where only the teams down here in the Esquire and Lady region or level were going to work the waiver wire. And now we have said that all of these teams will work the waiver wire in a worst to first type waiver wire order, meaning that these teams worst to first at this level first, and then worst to first here next, and then finally worst to first here in that order. And we're going to see how that looks for a second week and then continue developing these rules. Kev, I know you have had some nice things to say about this league. I love the way you put it. So tell everybody about the King of the Castle League.
Yeah, this was actually the first time I had ever heard of a relegation league or a league where you're have a small bench and you're pillaging off of another team, if you will. So for me, coming from what I thought was a wide world of fantasy games, this reminded me or was as close in my mind as a weekly fantasy game spread out over a season-long period. So you have a short bench, a roster of only 10, and you're starting 8, and then each week you are basically going into it matchup-wise, whether that be as you win or as you win and pillage or as you lose and have to fill off the waivers. You're really only looking to pick up and add starters based on either buys or on matchups. So it's a crazy world where you could have somebody like in week 13 where you're dropping Tom Brady, who's the number 6 overall quarterback, or CMC, who you might hope to have back in week 14 to make a push, both on bye. So both of them could be out there on waivers. So it's a crazy yet fun and active league. So I'm looking forward to see what we end up molding this into next year.
KB, Christian Brown saying, hey, Unc is my nephew right here, Christian Brown. Everybody say hi to Christian that's on, me and Kevin. Hi,
Christian.
How are you? Hey, so before we get into our primetime games of this week, which are going to lead into some NFL news about a change on the schedule, which will very much interest KB because he is a Steelers fan. Let's get into talking about this QB54 Arm and Leg League, right? All right, so I'm going to bring up the standings here first, and we're going to talk about how these ended up playing out. So I know that Ross Norris was on here earlier. I don't know if Ross is still here or not, co-creator of the QB54 Arm and Leg League. It was Ross's idea to come up with this very unique playoff system that we're going to use this year. It kind of matches what a lot of the Euro or Australian leagues do in their playoffs. So what we're doing is we're taking the top 5 teams from each one of these conferences, the AFC and the NFC. As you can see here in the AFC, that is Randy, Toby, Jonathan, Bill the Third, and myself. And then in the NFC, it's Anthony, Sean, Bob, Jared G, and Brett. What's going to happen is the number 1 team in each one of these conferences, which is Randy and then Anthony, are going to get first-round buys. And then instead of what we're used to seeing where the top-seeded team is going to play the lower-seeded team, in this case, the number 2 team is going to play the number 3 team, and then the number 4 is going to play the number 5. Here's what happens with that. Let's show you the bracket of what that looks like from each one of the sides. We're going to kind of concentrate on the AFC side here. All right, so as we said, the number 2 is going to play the number 3. The number 4 will play the number 5. The loser of the 4-5 game is eliminated. The winner of the 4-5 game will move into the square that you see right here in the second round. The loser of the 2-3 game will join them here in the second square, and they will play off against each other in the second week. The winner of the 2-3 game will play the number 1 team, as the number 1 team gets a first-round bye. Then the winner of the number 1 and then the 2-3 team moves over here into the next week and will enjoy a bye in that third week. The winner of the 4 and the loser of the 2-3 game will end up moving right here in this square, and the loser of the 1 and 2-3 game will move right here. Basically what we're saying is after you drop off the loser of the 4-5 team, it's double elimination from there for the rest of the bracket, with the number 1 team also collecting another bye a little bit later on. They will play this down. It will be 5 weeks, and then we will have the AFC and NFC champion, and they will be playing for a set of QB54 chairs. If you're not already following QB54 on all of their social media outlets, they are a sponsor of the Arm and Leg League. Please go out and follow them. They are doing a huge push right now for Christmas. I see Frank and Mike busting their butts every single day to get more and more of these games out into the hands and the fans that just love football. I've got a set of chairs here at the house already. I know MJ has a set. Jonathan Broughton, who is still in the playoff picture for this as well, has a set of these as well. So that is what you are playing for. And then the number 2, 3, and 4 teams also will win a little bit of cash for this league as well. But that top prize being those chairs. Kevin, you did not participate in the QB54 Arm and Leg League.
I did not, unfortunately, and I am kicking myself, if you will, as I watch those prizes come up and see what I'm missing out on.
So next year we will have this again. So make sure you sign up for it next year. KB, Steelers Against the World. Make sure you sign up for this next year as well. You can take this back to the college and play this with your classmates, guys on the football team, whatever, and play this game. So if you all want to see what that looks like a little bit more, let's see. I have an overlay of that as well this week. This is what that chart looks like. I think you could probably already see it pretty well on the website tonight, but there is the chart. Let me know if you want to see that any other time. It is at the top of the QB54 Arm and Leg League in that playoff spot, just like the playoff brackets are for the regular FSA league. All right, let's get into these prime time games. How do we do last week? I think you're ahead of me now, or we're even now.
No, so coming into this week, we were tied at 16 and 15 apiece.
Okay.
Just above 500, which sounded pretty nice. But then the abomination of Week 11 happened, where yourself took Arizona, Kansas City, and then the Rams, and then I took Arizona, Oakland, and the Bucks. I went 0-3, where you went 2-1, opposite. So that leaves us currently sitting at 18-16 for yourself, and then reverse 16-18 for me.
I like how this is sounding. This is good. I like this. I like that record. All right, so let's talk about, before we get into the games and who we're going to pick, the over unders and the plus minuses of this one. Let's talk about. It's been a Thanksgiving tradition for a bazillion years that Detroit and Dallas play on Thanksgiving, and a couple of years ago, when I say a couple, probably 2 decades ago, they decided to introduce a third game on Thursday, Thanksgiving. That third game was going to be Ravens at Steelers. That game is getting moved. And you explained to me before the show, why is that happening?
So as of Tuesday, I believe it came up that there was Mark Ingram and one other I think it was another running back, both put on the COVID list out of the Ravens camp. As of today, that number has grown to 10 positive cases. And as it stands under the current protocol, you must test negative 2 days in a row before you can be activated off that list. So whether that be a false positive or not, you cannot play without those 2 tests. Since the game's on Thursday, today being Wednesday, that's just not possible. So they moved the game back to Sunday, or hopes with Sunday. That way, if there is any false negatives, that will be fleshed out by that point in time. If not, they have not said what they will do with the game, if they will just play it Sunday, knowing that those players aren't going to be there, and they just use this extra couple of days as game plan for those teams, being that you no longer have a bye to play with, or do those teams, because they're in the same division, lose that game altogether?
Damn, that would be harsh if that happened. So as I wrote the script for tonight, that game was still time to be determined. I don't know if you've heard when they're going to have that game on. As you just said, probably still TBD, because we're not sure if it's going to happen. But at the very least, they, for the moment, have moved it to Sunday. So that's where we're at with that. So let's talk about the games that are remaining on Thursday. Houston at Detroit. Houston favored by 3 points with an over-under of 51.5. What do you think about that game?
That game is tough. I mean, DeAndre Swift coming on into his own. Randall Cobb getting put onto the IR. So kind of a back and forth. I'm going to take the Lions in this one in hopes that they swing things together. Also, personally, don't want to see the Texans win again this week, so of a personal vendetta. So I'm going to take the Lions in this.
Put me down for Houston. I think Matt Stafford has not been played like normal Matt Stafford. I think he's got some issues with a thumb, finger, something like that on his throwing hand. Leaving it to the running game is not an option for them anymore, no matter how much the running backs are coming into their own. Yeah, and you know what? I did not realize that Randall Cobb was out. That's news to me. But they still have Will Fuller V and Brandon Cooks there. So I'm okay with that. I think they've got – Detroit definitely has the better tight end of the two of them.
In Hawkinson.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm still going with Houston. I'm gonna go with the point spread on this one. 51.5. That is actually, of our primetime games, the highest over under of all of them as well. That will be your 12:30 game on Thanksgiving tomorrow. Houston at Detroit. So put me down for Houston. Now let's talk about the snooze fest of the Washington football team at Dallas Cowboys, which will be your 4:30 game. Dallas favored by 3. Yes, Dallas favored by 3 with an over-under of 46. How do you like this one?
You get Andy Dalton back last week
Yep.
and was underwhelming. You
Very.
get a run game that has been underwhelming.
Yep.
You get receivers in what is supposed to be the top receiving core on paper in Amari Cooper, CD Lamb, an outstanding rookie. Now you have to play the Washington football team, both at 3-7, both in the hunt to win that division still. But Washington with one more game with Alex Smith at the quarterback position and still the top-rated pass defense. So for me, I'm going to go with the defense and take Washington.
So you mentioned Alex Smith. I had to pick him up in a league this week, the big league, for a replacement for Buffalo's quarterback being out, Josh Allen. Underwhelming in his own right after putting up 300 plus yards for his first 2 games back. And then I think he was under 200 yards this week. Maybe got me 9 points or so. He's a statue back there in the pocket, which I get, considering the injury that he went through. I get that. Yeah. Scary Terry, great wide receiver. Antonio Gibson, okay running back. Running game is suspect right now. But Dallas, despite the 3-point favorite, they are just not getting it together. I don't even know, like, you never hear Zeke's name anymore, so I have no idea what's going on there. Tony Pollard is doing great over there as a running back as well. I see both away teams winning this week, so you have to put me down for the Washington football team as well. I see both Houston and Washington. The tradition of Detroit and Dallas on these Thursday night Thanksgiving or Thursday Thanksgiving games, it's not there this year.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, and you can give your opinion on this, but I feel as a record standpoint, the Jets are currently 0 going into this week. I believe if they were in the NFC least, they would have a shot to win that division.
Well, I mean, you're 3-6-1 is your first place team right now.
Yeah.
Think about this. One of those teams with a losing record is going to go to the playoffs. And it just kind of goes back to thinking, do we just take the best teams instead of the division winners? Even though you're playing that many teams inside of it. I get it. It's tradition. They've been doing it for a while, forever. Is there a way to change that up so you don't have this scenario? And I'm not wondering if it's not a conversation in the offseason.
See, when I looked at the NFL and the playoffs, I feel before they added the third wildcard team, they by far had the best playoff situation. It was nice and even. You take your 4 division winners, your 2 best next 2 teams in your wild card rounds, and you had them play in. A lot different than baseball, basketball, and hockey, where you have a points system and you have an overall ranking out, in your conferences and leagues to get in, to where winning your division didn't really hold that much weight anymore because you still had an outside shot to make the playoffs. Whereas this was, hey, winning the division really means something. I think now that they added the third wild card team and they only give 1 buyout, I think that you've already broken that format. So why not keep messing with it and move it a little bit more? Granted, I would not be a fan of that. I would rather them keep it the way it is, but you've already made the move once, so it'd be much easier to now move it again into a new format.
For me, I have always thought the 17 playoff format for each one of the conferences is the way to go. I've actually been preaching that style of system for probably 3, 4, 5 years even. In fact, we even did that playoff system in FSA one year where we took 7 teams with the first round bye. It was something that I wanted to do before the NFL even brought it up. I look at it from a business standpoint where I think business and competition, from a competition standpoint, knowing that there's only going to be 1 bye, I think in my mind, and I might be thinking about it wrong, that teams play harder and longer now we don't rest players as much in week 17, because if there's still an opportunity to get a first round bye with only one, you play harder longer. From a business standpoint, it adds 2 new playoff games to the NFL schedule, one more in each one of the rounds on both conferences. That's more television time. That's more advertising money. From a business standpoint, I think it made a lot of sense to add that 7th team in there. But, like you said, if they're going to mess with it, why don't we go ahead and take 8? Why don't we take the 4 division winners and the next 4 best teams? You never know. And nobody gets a bye in this one. Make it more like Major League Baseball or NBA or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's see. What would KB say here? It says, I think it's funny. Let them play in the playoffs, and before you know it, they will be gone, and it won't matter. Sure, it keeps one team out, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it isn't bad. Yeah, I don't know if KB, if you're actually saying that you agree with the 7 or the 6 playoff teams, if you're looking for something else. Like I said, whenever I heard that the announcement that they were bringing 7 teams in, my first thought was they're finally doing something smart from a business standpoint, maybe even from a competition standpoint. I like the idea of 7 teams, but all right, man, we got way off track. Let's get back to these primetime games. Sunday night football, Chicago at Green Bay, the oldest rivalry in the NFL. They're at Green Bay. Packers favored by 8.5. But with an over-under of only 45, the lowest of all of the primetime games. Who do you like here?
This one's easy. I'll keep it short and sweet. Green Bay.
Put me down for Green Bay as well. Short and sweet. Gotcha. All right, now we got 2 birds playing against each other on Monday Night Football. The Seahawks at the Eagles. I don't know how much of a fan you are of the Eagles after coming from where you came from in your background or whatever. Seattle favored by 5, over under of 50 points. Who you like here?
So this one is very interesting to watch. And for those that did not get to catch my preview of this a little bit in our Top Dog segment on the Average Bros, go back and listen to it. I'll go into a little bit more in depth then on our podcast version. You can hear it. But having been in this area, in the Northeast, Philly area, there's a lot of turmoil with the Eagles. There's a lot of uncertainty within the team in general. Everybody's on the hot seat. Everybody's on the outs, especially the coaching staff, which is particularly funny to watch this game because you watch DK Metcalf, and who is an absolute monster. You pair him with another true number 1 in Tyler Lockett, and then give him a strong arm quarterback, and they've been nothing but magic all year. Now, if you go back to last year, I believe it was the playoff game. If not, it was the last game of the year against the Seahawks. DK Metcalf absolutely lit up the Eagles secondary, breaking multiple big runs to secure the Seahawks to win. DK Metcalf was overlooked by this Eagles team and not taken when they knew that they needed a big receiver like DK. They said that he only has one route. He can only run streaks. That's all he can be used for. But I don't know when we're going to stop in the NFL labeling receivers this way, because if you know that my receiver only does one thing really well, so be it. I'm not going to go in baseball and ask my pitcher to play first. I'm going to make him play first, and I'm going to live with it, and I'm going to move the other pieces around it. If I have an absolute monster, I believe he's like 6'3", 300 pounds, pure muscle. Just we watched him throwing guys around, and catching Buda Baker in the one game. How you pass on a guy like that is beyond me, but I digress. I'm taking Seattle.
I think people forget, coaches forget that no matter how good they are at the college level, they have the ability to progress at the pro level. You're taking a kid out of college who at sometimes is 21, 22 years old, and you're expecting that game to be the only thing that they can do when they move forward, right? And I think DK Metcalf has proven that he's more than just a streaks guy. Like, he can pretty much take that ball anywhere on the field as long as he's got Russell Wilson throwing him the ball. Now, Christian Brown says out here, Carson Wentz just isn't getting it done anymore. Start Jalen Hurts. He also asked, who was the best rookie out of the draft in your opinion? KB, are you talking about the draft we just had, 2020, or are you talking about the upcoming 2021 draft? Let us know. Kevin also put me down for Seattle as well. Hometown favorite here in the Bouchard house, the wife's favorite team. Not that I would pick Philadelphia anyways. It's a dumpster fire over there right now. But I'm taking Seattle on. I'm going to make sure that I say it's because it's my wife's team. So put me down for Seattle. So it's usually the part where we would say, hey, here's who you got on bye this week. Make sure you set your lineups. No teams on bye week 12. Start them all. As long as they're not on the COVID list, on the IR, are just benched for team reasons, everybody's playing this week. Broadcasts. Our next broadcast and podcast. So this show that we're doing right now will be a podcast tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock. You can go out there and find it on all of those great sites and apps that Kevin told you about at the beginning of the show. Empty Wagon Fantasy Football broadcast will be back at 12:01 a.m. East Coast time, Saturday, 28 November. Their podcast from that broadcast will be released Saturday morning at 5 o'clock, and they will be back for another broadcast at 12:01 a.m. East Coast time on Monday, 30 November. That broadcast will be released as a podcast at 5 o'clock in the morning, 30 November. The Average Bros with Kevin and Average Josh will be back for their broadcast at 8 p.m. East Coast time, 1 December. They will release that podcast at 5 o'clock in the morning on 2 December. You're going to see our two awesome faces again next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. East Coast time, 2 December. That broadcast will be released as a podcast on the 3rd of December. Right now, KB says, who do you think the best rookie was in the 2020 draft? I was pretty sure it was going to be Joe Burrow until the injury. I think right now it is probably between Minnesota wide receiver Justin Jefferson.
Yep, that's my pick.
And the Chargers quarterback that they have Justin Herbert. I think those are the two finalists right now. I don't think anybody can touch either one of those guys. I think Burrow probably would have had it had he not gone down hurt. Sean Purcell says he thinks it's Herbert. Seems like this Rookie of the Year award goes to quarterbacks more often than not. I think just for that reason, it's probably leans that way. But Justin Jefferson has had a great year as a wide receiver, especially coming in on the team and doing what he's doing with Adam Thielen on the other side of the ball and then losing Stephon Diggs. I think he's done great right there. Ross says he's back again. Ross, we're just wrapping up. Appreciate you coming back. You can go back and watch this on 1.5 times later because we are now at an hour and 8 minutes. So we got to get out of here. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Finger Lakes Mercantile, which is a bowl sponsor. Football Darts, who is our broadcast sponsor. Nature Coast Tailgating, who is our World Championship Bowl sponsor. QB54 Arm and Leg, the QB54, which is our Arm and Leg sponsor. The Recast, who are the official music of FSA. And then Finger Lakes again, Deep South Creations, Southern Siren Sugar Scrub, and Cranky Veteran Candle Company, all bowl game sponsors this year. FRB, if you're still out there, you wanted to know what the bowl games, the rivalry bowl games are all about, those are your rivalry bowl game sponsors. Those one we just mentioned as bowl game sponsors. Kev, I know you got to get out of there. We definitely kept you longer than we anticipated. Make sure you get with the family. Enjoy your Thanksgiving tomorrow. Everybody out there in the Alliance, have a happy Thanksgiving. Make sure you don't forget to set your lineups, and good luck to everybody in this first round of the playoffs in the redraft and in the QB54 Arm and Leg League. The Dynasty Leagues still have 12, 13, and 14. weeks to go for regular season. So 3 more weeks of regular season before they hit the playoffs. So make sure you continue setting your lineups there as well if you're part of the dynasty. And yeah, we'll see you next week. What's your Thanksgiving plans?
Headed down to the shore shortly after we get off here. Go to relax with the fam and then have a big multi-family get-together tomorrow. You'll enjoy some turkey, watch some football games. And
is big family get-together COVID sanctioned?
Well, so we are labeling it a religious gathering, which has no limits as of right now. So we are going to be praising the turkey as much as we can throughout our time together. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I do wish everybody happy Thanksgiving with their time with their families. And then, as we move forward throughout the season, although I hope he has a great Thanksgiving, I wish him no luck in the rest of the season. Damian, better luck next year, bud.
Teams, make sure you continue setting your lineups. Even if you don't have an opponent, you are going to collect the points that you score for the remaining weeks. You are playing for top scoring team of the year, which comes with a cash prize. So make sure you're starting your lineups in that. And that's how we will end it. Kev, I'll see you later on this weekend. We'll get some real work done for FSA. Cool?
Cool.
All right, man. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.